This is Black and White Makes Gray, a memoir of an interracial childhood by Judith Davidson. Chapter 10. The four of us kids were gathered for dinner in the cramped space around the small red table in the kitchen, eating crumbled hamburger and sliced fried potatoes with ketchup on unmatched plates, with utensils taken from mixed sets of silverware. I noticed Mom, who was frying more potatoes on the stove in the side alcove where the appliances resided, was wearing an ample red cotton suede dress she had just finished making for herself. Before we came to live in this house, Mom did not sew very much, and I was surprised to learn she knew enough to make a dress on her own. Red and orange were her favorite colors when she wanted to signal a joyous mood, and I liked the rich red of this fabric. However, I wondered why she had chosen to make it and wear it today. Suddenly, she left her duties at the frying pan and handed me a manila envelope. "Judy, read this to the others," she said, returning to the potatoes and turning her back to us. I pulled a sheet of paper out of the envelope, turning it over to look at the official form. I had never seen a marriage certificate before, so it took me a few minutes to make sense of what I was looking at. "You got married?" I asked in surprise. "Today, while we were at school?" She nodded. "Can you read it aloud to everyone?" "Certificate of marriage," I announced to the three others who were looking at me in stunned surprise. Evan Porter married Pamela A. Davidson at 11:30 a.m. on January 24th, 1967. The marriage took place in the Clark County Courthouse in Vancouver, Washington, I said, summarizing the important parts of the document to my brother and sisters. Vancouver was in Washington State, across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon, and I wondered why they chose to get married in another state. This, however, did explain why she was wearing the red dress, and I guessed it was a small sign of their celebration. The four of us sat silently, not knowing what was expected of us. I wondered what Dad was going to think and if he had known this was coming. I had a feeling it wouldn't sit well with my grandfather. Note to Evan. "Did you know Mom had never spoken to us formally about her relationship with you? Given the way our family operated, each of us keeping our thoughts to ourselves and just went along with what was happening, it never occurred to me as her oldest daughter that I could ask her anything about the relationship you two had. I mean, I know that she shared a bedroom and a bed with you, so I assumed it was a romantic relationship, but I had no clue what promises had been made or what expectations you held towards each other. It worried me that the two of you hadn't married as soon as we moved into this house, because up to that point, I had always been taught women weren't supposed to sleep with or live with unrelated men until after marriage, which is why I was always in a bind when people asked me who you were. Now, I knew the two of you had made a commitment, but I didn't know what it meant to the two of you. And also, why did you choose to marry across the river in Vancouver, Clark County, Washington? Was that something about race? No one ever explained that to me. Years later, my sister Janet told me she had been furious that Mom had married you without telling us ahead of time. She said, "I used to hug Mom goodnight every night, but from that day onwards, I never hugged her goodnight again." I don't know what the others thought. I haven't talked to them about it. Did you have any idea how this felt to us? Or did you simply believe that those were the things adults did and children went along with? I added ketchup to the plate of fried potatoes I was eating. None of us said anything. I put the marriage certificate back in the manila envelope. "Thanks for letting us know," I said. I didn't mean it to be sarcastic, but rather a plain and truthful statement. The questions began to whir in my brain. Now that they were married, were we supposed to go on calling him Mr. Porter? If the outside world thought it was a horrible thing to live with a black man, was it better to be married to him, or maybe worse? My mother, my father, and Louise were married close to the same date, at 3 p.m. on January 23rd, 1967, at the King County Courthouse in Seattle, Washington. My grandparents brought us up on the train to attend the wedding party in Seattle that followed later. The fun part was we got to stay at a hotel with Grandpa and Grandma, and there was lots of good food at the party. However, after what happened on Christmas, I was glad I had some distance from Dad and Louise. Shortly after they were married, Mr. Porter began working as a janitor on the day shift for a nursing home across the river, a long bus ride from our home. At about the same time, Mom stopped working at Paul's restaurant, which was a great relief to me, although it meant the end of the daily frozen pizza for dinner and no more excess change for treats at the store. But then again, no handgun banging around in the bottom of Mom's spacious purse. It seemed like a worthwhile trade. I'd take it. "Randy, do you think Mom is pregnant?" I asked, as I sat on his four-poster bed. Mom had gained weight, so much so that she soon had few clothes she could wear except for the ample red dress she had made for her wedding day. He wrinkled his nose. She does look bigger. I was glad to know I wasn't the only one who had noticed. "One of us has to ask her." "Let's toss a coin," said Randy, and he got a quarter from a box next to his bed. "I call heads," he said as he flipped. We watched the coin go up in the air and down to the floor, and there it lay. Heads were up, and Randy won. I found my mother downstairs in the kitchen at the stove, and I noted how hard her round belly pushed against the front of the oven as she stirred something in a frying pan. "Randy and I were wondering if you were pregnant," I said quickly. Then I held my breath, totally unsure how my mother would react to my question. "Yes, I am," she said calmly without looking up. "I've been meaning to tell you for some time." My throat closed for a minute and I couldn't breathe. "So when are you going to have the baby?" "In about a month." "You mean you are 8 months pregnant?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I thought you would be too excited about it, and it would still be such a long way off." "But it's only a month away. When were you going to tell us?" "Soon," she said, looking at me for the first time. I shook my head and ran back upstairs to find Randy. "Is she?" he asked eagerly as I stopped at his doorway. "We were right," I sighed. "She's 8 months pregnant. We are going to have a brother or sister in a month from now." "She's 8 months pregnant?" "Yes, 8 months, and never said a word to us." "Wow, I'm glad we asked. It would have been embarrassing if people had started asking us about it and we didn't know." "You're telling me?" I was exasperated with my mother, and I was sure other adults had not been so much in the dark as her children. I was sure they had looked at her and knew without a doubt she was pregnant. I wondered when she would have told us. Knowing her, it could well have been as she headed to the hospital in labor. Of course we would love the baby. After all, it was a baby. But I registered that with the baby, our identity as an interracial family was irrevocably determined. We had become something that people didn't really know how to talk about. We were not one thing or the other. We had moved into a gray area. After all, black and white makes gray. I was a teenage girl who was already worried about what people thought, like with the divorce. I wondered how the birth of the baby would compound that and what the social consequences would be. Luckily, as it turned out, this neighborhood of mixed houses and businesses in Northwest Portland were more open and accepting of different kinds of families than any other Portland neighborhoods were, as we learned later. For the first time in my life, I actually attended a school in which there were a small handful of black youngsters. I quickly developed a circle of girlfriends who were warm, funny, and adventurous. Good people to eat lunch and joke with within the cafeteria, play with after school, or head downtown together for a movie or window shopping. Their families were down to earth and less preoccupied by wealth and status than the world from which I had come. Ginger, Karen, Marie, Dolores, Leslie, Elise, and more. But there was always the possibility of little cracks in the seams. Like the girl down the street whom I really liked playing with, but we always had to meet at her house and she could never come to mine. I can't remember if she actually explained it to me or if it was my mother who finally tipped me off. Her mother didn't want her to enter our house. Over time, I learned that when this happened, it might be attributed to the fact that I had a black stepfather. But equally as often, our house was shunned because of jazz, as some people believed the jazz world was where one would find unsavory people or activities. Whether or not there were unsavory people or activities occurring at our house, the presence of a black stepfather, who was also a jazz musician, and a mother who ran off with a Negro, as it was described, suggested the unsavory. It was those small cracks in the seams that were behind the development of a new kind of vigilance in my life. Prejudice, I learned, is something to be always on guard for. It could occur anywhere, and I needed to be ready. Later that week, I took the bus to the downtown library. My mother had always said the four of us were raised by Dr. Benjamin Spock's book on babies and child development. So I checked out a copy, brought it home, and began to read. I was eager to finish before the baby arrived, and I didn't have much time. It was the very last days of her pregnancy, and my mother was sitting on the couch in the living room, her baby-full stomach resting on her legs. "Judy," she said suddenly, "could you please get me a towel? I think there's some in the kitchen in the laundry Randy just brought up." Setting down my copy of Dr. Spock's Baby and Child Care, I got up from the chair and went to the kitchen, grabbed a bath towel from the laundry basket, and brought it back to her. She took it from me and, to my surprise, shoved it between her legs under the red dress. Then carefully and slowly, as if she were speaking to a visitor from abroad just learning English, she said to me, "Now, I don't want you to get excited, but I think the baby's water has broken. So I'm going to need to get to the hospital." "The baby's coming!" I screamed at her, wagging my hands frantically. "Keep calm," she admonished. "I need you to call a taxi so I can get to the hospital." I rushed to the rotary phone on the dark oblong table with the long, thin legs in the front hallway, scrambling through the yellow pages for the taxi section and the name of a taxi cab company. I gave them the address and then said in a nervous squeak, "Come quick, my mom is having a baby." Then I went back to my mother, seated on the turquoise couch that had been with us many years. Together, we waited and waited. Repeatedly, I got up and went to the tall front door, looking to the street through the long glass panels, but no cab arrived. After some time had passed, Mom said, "I think you're going to have to call another cab company. But this time, let's not say I'm having a baby. That could make them nervous." I nodded, understanding what she meant. I went back to the phone book, looked up the cab companies again, and dialed the next number. "Hello? Yes, I'd like a cab at," and gave them the address in a crisp, clear voice. "Thank you. How long will that be? 10 minutes? Great. We'll be here, I said in my most adult voice. I sighed deeply when I got off the phone again and took up my watch position near the door. Exactly 10 minutes later, a cab arrived. I opened the door and called out to the driver. Just a minute. Be right there. Mom navigated her way up and off the couch, waddling through the house with the towel still clutched between her thighs. As she passed the table by the door to her bedroom, she grabbed up her large purse, clutching it against her round belly as she tried to hang on to the purse and keep the towel in place at the same time. Then she pulled out her wallet and gave me a $5 bill. Can you call Evan and tell him what's happening, she said to me. Tell him I'll be at the hospital. Good Samaritan. He can meet me there. You are in charge. You'll have to figure out dinner for the others. She made her way out the door and very carefully down the few front steps. I'll take care of it, I yelled at her back. We were only right around the corner from Good Samaritan, but it was clear she wouldn't have made it walking. I knew that the first 4 of us had been born at Providence Hospital and realized this, as yet unborn baby, was already initiating new traditions by being born in a different hospital. As I watched her get into the cab, my hands started to shake. I couldn't say why, but I was overwhelmed with emotion. Would Mom be okay? Would the baby be okay? I took a big breath and went back to make the call to Mr. Porter's job before I thought about dinner for my brothers and sisters. Oh my gosh, I thought, I am all alone. Much later that night, I heard the front door open, and looking over the stairs, I saw Mr. Porter had entered and was closing the door behind himself. I went downstairs to find him sitting on their bed, staring at a piece of paper in his hands. How's Mom? I asked quietly. He looked up, surprised, turning towards me, but his eyes didn't seem to be focusing. She's fine, he said in a flat voice. The baby? Boy or girl? Boy. I looked at him sitting on the bed and staring at the ground like he was some kind of zombie. Why wasn't he excited like I was? Tonight he almost seemed as strange to me as the first day we moved into this house, when his moods were inaccessible to me. Note to Evan. At that time, I didn't know how little you knew about parenting and how precarious your early life had been. Born to a 15-year-old mother, losing your father to tuberculosis, bounced around from relatives to boarding houses, and by the time you were 16 years old, a professional musician playing in clubs. As I looked at you sitting there, I didn't know if you felt awe or terror or joy or sadness, and I wouldn't know until long after your death about the crippling depression and even suicidal thoughts you'd had as a younger man. It would have been hard for me to understand that you might feel deep love for the baby. At the same time, the baby evoked horrendous despair in your heart. Despair that you had been the instrument for bringing another black male into a world that was hopelessly aligned against such individuals. You never felt safe in your skin except when you were playing jazz. What would your son experience? Would life for him be as alienating as it had been for you? These were facts that slowly emerged over time, like some stubborn glue being squeezed from an old tube. If I had known how you might have been feeling at that moment, and would we have been able to speak about it? What's his name? I asked, trying one last time to get something out of him on this amazing night. Yvonne, and he handed me the paper where the baby's name was written. Yvonne Carule Porter, April 11th, 1967. My shiny-haired, blonde, 8th grade friend, Dolores, popped the question while we were eating lunch in the basement cafeteria at Chapman Grade School. "Why do you call him Mr. Porter?" she asked. I stared at her, surprised by this sudden shift in conversation away from the Girl Scout troop activities. I stopped to think for a minute. I knew why, but it was clear from her question she might find my answer stupid. "You've been living with him for a year," she insisted. "I know," I pleaded as if I needed to get her permission, "but no one ever told me I could call him anything else." "Why do they have to tell you what you can call him? I mean, you are living with him." "They do. They or the adults." She frowned and turned away to talk to another girl at the table, and then the gym teacher started calling for each of the tables to pick up and throw out their trash before going out to play for recess. That afternoon, when I came home from school, my mother was standing just inside her bedroom, changing Yvonne at the makeshift changing table on top of a bureau. "Mom?" I twisted my hands in an awkward cat's cradle motion, made anxious by the question I was planning to ask. She said, attention focused on the baby's skinny bird-like hands and feet that were beating the empty air. His soft baby skin was ivory, a color like the little white tiles in Mom's inlaid teak Indian table next to the turquoise couch in the living room. His hair, which had barely begun to come in, lay like dark lace against his delicate skull. "Do you think it would be okay if I called Mr. Porter Evan?" "Yes, I was wondering why you didn't." "You didn't tell us we could. Didn't you teach us to always use Mr. or Mrs. unless an adult permitted us to use the first name?" "I suppose so, but this is a different kind of case. I thought you'd do it when you were ready." I left the room more than a little irritated. All those times I had carefully chosen to say Mr. Porter, even though it seemed absurd. Parents, I groaned between my teeth. Children followed the rules adults set, and then adults changed the rules behind our backs, leaving us, children, to look like idiots. Didn't they understand? I wanted to scream at her. "These are the rules you gave us. We are following those rules." My friends must have been laughing at me behind my back for months. Mr. Porter came in the front door as I was heading up the stairs, and I stopped halfway up, turned, and looked down on him. "Hi, Evan," I said breezily from above him on the stairs. He looked at me, his tongue in his cheek, puffing out the skin as if he were trying to move around a smile. "Hi," he answered, passing into the living room. "Evan," I said softly to myself. "Evan," I repeated with purpose. Thank you to Westford Community Access Television for providing facilities and production support, all of which made this podcast possible.